She followed every traditional ritual, consulted 3 different fortune tellers, and threw away thousands of dollars worth of belongings because they were cursed. But the real curse was something she never saw coming. In the heart of Edo State, Nigeria, where red earth paths wind gracefully between towering ancient Iroko trees and morning mist carries the rich, intoxicating scent of palm oil and burning wood across the village, lived the Okwu family in their modest but well-maintained compound. The majestic Iroko tree that provided generous shade for their traditional mud brick home had stood as a silent sentinel for 3 generations, witnessing countless births, deaths, celebrations, and sorrows throughout the decades. But it had never seen anything quite like what was about to unfold beneath its protective canopy. Ngozi Okwu, at 45 years old, possessed what her beloved late grandmother had reverently called the gift of seeing beyond the veil, a mystical, spiritual sensitivity that had been passed down through the women of her ancestral lineage for generations, allowing them to perceive supernatural threats and divine opportunities that remain completely invisible to ordinary mortal eyes. Her weathered but still graceful hands, adorned with traditional coral beads that had belonged to her mother and grandmother before her, moved with practiced precision and increasingly urgent intensity as she performed her elaborate morning protective rituals that had grown more complex and desperate with each passing month. But on this particular morning, as golden sunlight filtered through the Oroko's massive canopy and cast intricate dancing shadows across the red earth of their compound, her ritual carried a weight of fear and desperation that had not been present in previous years. She had awakened well before dawn from a dream so vivid, terrifying, and prophetically clear that her hands still trembled uncontrollably as she worked with the sacred cowrie shells and blessed palm oil. In the dream, she had witnessed her beloved family sitting peacefully around their familiar wooden dinner table, sharing their evening meal and discussing the day's events with the comfortable familiarity of people who had loved each other for decades. But suddenly, without any warning or explanation, one by one, each precious family member began to fade away, like smoke dissipating in the wind, until only she remained, calling out frantically and desperately to empty chairs that no longer held the people she cherished most in the world. Her husband Shinidu emerged slowly from their modest home, carefully adjusting the collar of his government-issued work shirt with the methodical precision of a man who had performed this same routine for 20 years. A tall, dignified man with graying temples that spoke eloquently of wisdom earned through decades of patient living and quiet endurance, he carried himself with the understated grace of someone who had learned to navigate life's inevitable challenges with faith, perseverance, and practical wisdom. Over the course of their 23 years of marriage, he had watched with growing concern and barely concealed alarm as his beloved wife gradually evolved from a respectfully cautious woman who honored traditional spiritual practices in moderation into someone increasingly consumed by overwhelming fears of invisible supernatural threats that seemed to multiply exponentially with each passing week. "Good morning, my dear love," Chinedu said softly and gently, though his warm voice now carried the subtle but unmistakable weariness of someone who had grown reluctantly accustomed to beginning each new day by carefully navigating his wife's latest spiritual crisis with diplomatic skill and endless patience. The children need to eat their breakfast before they leave for school, and I must prepare for my journey to the government office." Ngozi looked up sharply from her intricate cowrie shell arrangement, her dark eyes flashing with the intense urgency and barely controlled panic of someone who believed with absolute certainty that she had received divine warning about imminent danger threatening her family's very survival. "Breakfast can wait, Chinedu. This spiritual crisis cannot wait even one more moment. Last night, the ancestors of our bloodline visited me in powerful dreams and showed me something absolutely terrible approach our family like a dark storm cloud. Our household is under serious, coordinated spiritual attack, and we must take immediate protective action before it's too late." Chinedu suppressed the familiar, weary sigh that had become as routine and predictable as his morning prayers over the past 2 years. "Ngozi, my beloved wife, what exactly did you witness in this dream that has caused you such distress?" "I saw our family disappearing, Chinedu, vanishing completely from this earth as if we had never existed. One by one, each member of our household faded away into nothingness until I was completely and utterly alone, crying out desperately to empty spaces where my loved ones should have been sitting. But there's much more disturbing news, my husband. Yesterday afternoon at the village market, Mrs. Adaz approached me with extremely troubling information that confirms my worst fears about the supernatural forces working against us. 18-year-old Kioma appeared gracefully in the doorway, her crisp school uniform bearing testament to her mother's obsessive attention to proper presentation despite the early morning spiritual emergency. She possessed her father's naturally calm intelligence and methodical analytical mind, combined harmoniously with her mother's fierce determination and protective maternal instincts. But lately her academic focus and emotional well-being had been significantly disrupted by her mother's escalating spiritual anxieties and the daily drama they created within their once peaceful household. "Good morning, Mama." "Good morning, Papa," Chioma said, with the respectful tone that both parents had carefully cultivated in their children through years of consistent guidance. Though genuine concern and growing worry flickered clearly across her delicate, expressive features as she observed her mother's increasingly elaborate ritual, preparations, and obviously agitated emotional state. "Mama, are you performing the protection ceremony again this morning? What has happened now to cause such serious concern and urgency?" "Child, sit down immediately and listen very carefully. Both of you children must sit down right now and pay close attention," Ngozi commanded, with the stern, uncompromising authority of someone who believed with absolute conviction that she was protecting her family from mortal, supernatural danger that others were too spiritually blind and naive to perceive or understand properly. 16-year-old David bounded energetically through the doorway with characteristic youthful enthusiasm, his school bag slung carelessly over one shoulder and his uniform slightly wrinkled despite his mother's obsessive attention to household order and proper appearance. He possessed his father's sharp analytical mind and natural healthy skepticism about extraordinary claims, but had inherited his mother's passionate nature and tendency toward intense emotional responses, a potent combination that often led to stimulating philosophical debates and challenging theological discussions that tested the patience and wisdom of his more traditionally minded relatives and conservative neighbors. "Good morning, everyone in this household," David said, with his typical cheerful energy and optimism, then paused abruptly as he noticed the thick tension filling the compound air like smoke, and observed his mother's increasingly familiar ritual preparations spread across the ground. "Wait just a moment. Are we having another emergency family meeting about spiritual warfare and invisible supernatural enemies threatening our peaceful existence?" "David, you must show proper respect for your mother's legitimate spiritual concerns and stop treating serious supernatural matters as if they were subjects for juvenile humor," Chinedu warned gently but firmly, though his tone notably lacked the strong conviction it had carried in earlier years before this spiritual obsession had begun consuming their family life. He was growing increasingly worried about how his wife's supernatural fixations were negatively affecting their children's healthy understanding of both genuine spirituality and practical, rational approaches to life's normal challenges and difficulties. Ngozi stood up abruptly from her position beside the carefully arranged cowrie shells, her movements sharp and jerky, with barely controlled fear, frustration, and righteous indignation. "Mrs. Adais informed me yesterday that her cousin, who lives in the busy city of Benin, witnessed a mysterious woman who looks exactly like me in every detail. Same height, same complexion, same distinctive way of tying her traditional head wrap, visiting 3 different native doctors' shrines and asking extremely specific, detailed questions about methods for disrupting a particular family's spiritual protection systems, with special focus on techniques for blocking children's academic progress and creating serious financial hardship for hardworking parents." The family members exchanged deeply worried glances among themselves, each processing this disturbing information in their own way. Their distinctive compound was indeed one of the very few easily recognizable properties in the entire village, clearly marked and identified by such a massive, ancient, and historically significant Iroko tree, making it quite simple for anyone with malicious intentions to locate and target them specifically for supernatural attack. "But Mama, with all due respect," Kioma said gently and diplomatically, trying her best to inject calm, reason, and logical thinking into the rapidly escalating emotional situation. There could be many completely innocent explanations for that story. Perhaps this mysterious woman wasn't asking questions about our specific family at all. Maybe she was desperately seeking spiritual help and guidance for her own family's serious problems and simply happened to describe circumstances that are coincidentally similar to ours. Or perhaps, Mama, David added thoughtfully, drawing intelligently upon important lessons about information reliability and the dangers of gossip that he had learned during his studies at school. This story gradually changed and grew more dramatic and alarming as it passed through multiple different people in the community. You know from experience how information frequently gets altered, exaggerated, and embellished when it travels from person to person through our village, especially when it involves spiritual matters that people naturally find frightening, exciting, or personally threatening. Ngozi's eyes flashed dangerously, with a volatile mixture of frustration, fear, and profound disappointment as she turned to face her children with an expression that clearly conveyed her belief that they were being foolishly naive about serious supernatural dangers. You children are far too young and spiritually immature to understand the subtle, complex realities of sophisticated spiritual warfare conducted by experienced practitioners of dark arts. The enemy of our souls is extremely cunning, patient, and methodical in his approach. He doesn't announce his deadly attacks with loud drums and bright trumpets, or send formal written invitations to spiritual battles that might alert his intended victims. She began pacing rapidly around the small compound with increasing agitation, her colorful, traditional wrapper swishing dramatically with each energetic step as her voice rose steadily in pitch and intensity. He works very carefully and systematically through seemingly innocent events, apparent coincidences, and ordinary circumstances that spiritually blind and naive people automatically dismiss as mere chance occurrences without any deeper supernatural significance. Her pacing became more frantic as she continued her explanation. Listen to me very carefully, because your very lives may depend upon understanding this crucial spiritual truth. Just last week, our neighbor Mr. Emeka's intelligent son failed his university entrance examination completely and unexpectedly, despite months of intensive preparation and consistently strong academic performance throughout his entire secondary school career. Failed utterly and completely, shocking everyone who knew his capabilities and dedication. Her voice reached a shrill pitch that made both children instinctively step backward toward the safety of the doorway. And do you know what Mr. Emeka confided to me in strictest confidence during a private conversation? 3 days before that crucial examination that would determine his son's entire future, his wife made the terrible, foolish decision to stop attending the expensive prayer mountain meetings because she thought they were becoming too costly and cutting too deeply into their household budget. She stopped pacing abruptly and fixed her children with an intense stare. The very moment you neglect spiritual vigilance and protection, Satan immediately recognizes it as a formal invitation to launch coordinated attacks against everything you hold most dear. The instant you think you can save money by reducing spiritual protection and cutting corners on supernatural security, the enemy counts it as official permission to systematically destroy your family's blessings, progress, and divine destiny. Chinedu made a valiant attempt to inject calm reason and balanced perspective into the increasingly heated and emotionally charged situation. Ngozi, my beloved wife, even if Mrs. Adazi's story is completely accurate in every single detail, we still don't know this mysterious woman's true intentions or motivations. She could very well have been seeking legitimate help and spiritual guidance for her own family's problems rather than trying to cause deliberate harm to our household. Chinedu! Ngozi's voice reached an ear-piercing pitch that made both children visibly wince and caused several curious neighbors to look in their direction with obvious concern. Are you so completely spiritually deaf and blind that you cannot hear the loud warning bells ringing urgently all around our family? This is definitely not about some desperate woman seeking innocent help for her own problems. This is about deliberate, calculated, sophisticated spiritual warfare, specifically designed and carefully planned to systematically destroy everything we have built together over more than 2 decades of marriage, hard work, and faithful service to God. Their heated family discussion was suddenly and dramatically interrupted by the perfectly timed arrival of Sister Grace Adeyemi, their talkative neighbor who had successfully established herself as the village's primary informal news network and most reliable source of dramatic, often alarming information. Sister Grace possessed what seemed like an almost supernatural ability to appear whenever significant, potentially scandalous events were unfolding in the community. And she invariably arrived fully armed with additional details, rumors, and speculation that somehow managed to make every situation appear more urgent and alarming than it had initially seemed. "Good morning, Brother Chinedu, Sister Ngozi, and dear children," she called out loudly in her characteristically penetrating voice that carried unmistakable undertones of barely contained excitement, usually associated with bearers of significant and potentially dramatic news. "I sincerely hope I'm not interrupting anything important, but I felt absolutely compelled to come immediately and share what I've discovered." "Good morning, Sister Grace," the family replied, with varying degrees of enthusiasm and wariness, knowing from long experience that her visits rarely brought peaceful, reassuring, or spiritually uplifting information to their household. "Sister Ngozi, I came as quickly as my legs could carry me because I have obtained additional and extremely disturbing information about that mysterious woman who has been asking specific, detailed questions about your family at various spiritual consultation centers throughout the region," Sister Grace announced breathlessly, clearly relishing her role as the bearer of dramatic news. Ngozi immediately abandoned her morning ritual preparations and hurried toward the compound gate with eager, desperate anticipation written clearly across her worried features. "What did you learn, Sister Grace? Please tell me absolutely everything you discovered, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant the details might appear." My cousin's very close friend, who works directly at one of the most prominent and well-respected native doctors' shrines in busy Benin City, provided me with extremely detailed, first-hand information about this woman's suspicious activities and specific inquiries, Sister Grace reported, with obvious satisfaction at being the source of such important intelligence. According to her absolutely reliable testimony, this mysterious woman was remarkably specific and clearly focused in all her inquiries and questions. She paused dramatically for effect before continuing. She wasn't asking general questions about basic spiritual protection or routine family blessings that most people request. Instead, she wanted highly detailed, technical information about advanced methods for systematically disrupting a particular family's carefully established spiritual defense systems, and she seemed especially interested in sophisticated techniques for blocking children's academic progress and creating persistent financial instability within targeted households. Chinedu felt his heart sink like a stone as he watched his wife's expressive face transform with a powerful mixture of vindication, alarm, and barely controlled panic that he had come to recognize and genuinely dread over the past several months. You see exactly what I've been desperately trying to tell all of you for weeks?" Ngozi turned to face her family with triumphant urgency that bordered dangerously on hysteria. "This is absolutely not coincidence or imagination or simple misunderstanding on my part. This is deliberate, calculated, methodically planned spiritual warfare being conducted against our specific household by someone with detailed inside knowledge of our family circumstances, daily routines, and spiritual practices. Sister Grace nodded gravely and knowingly, clearly enjoying her important role as messenger of dramatic and highly alarming news that was obviously causing such intense emotional reactions. And that's definitely not all the disturbing information I've gathered, Sister Ngozi. According to my cousin's reliable friend, this same mysterious woman was personally observed at 2 additional spiritual consultation centers over the past month, and in each location, she was asking identical, specific questions about your family's protection methods, daily schedules, and personal vulnerabilities. How could a complete stranger possibly know so much detailed information about our family's private spiritual practices and personal circumstances? Kioma asked with genuine concern, now creeping into her naturally skeptical voice, despite her strong tendency toward rational explanation of apparently supernatural events. Child, that's exactly how sophisticated modern spiritual warfare operates in today's world, Sister Grace explained, with the practiced authority and confidence of someone who considered herself a genuine expert on supernatural conflicts and invisible spiritual battles. The enemy conducts extremely careful reconnaissance and detailed surveillance before launching coordinated attacks against selected targets. He studies his chosen victims methodically and patiently, systematically identifying their specific strengths, particular weaknesses, daily routines, established spiritual protection methods, financial vulnerabilities, and emotional pressure points. David remained unconvinced despite the mounting circumstantial evidence and increasingly dramatic testimony. But Sister Grace, how can we be absolutely certain that this information is completely accurate and reliable? How many different people has this story actually passed through before finally reaching us here today? Could some important details have been unconsciously added, accidentally altered, or deliberately exaggerated somewhere along the complicated chain of communication? Sister Grace waved his perfectly reasonable question away with dismissive authority and obvious impatience. Young man, when multiple independent sources from completely different locations confirm exactly the same specific information and details, you don't waste precious time questioning accuracy and reliability with academic skepticism. You take immediate, decisive, protective action before the spiritual attacks intensify dramatically and cause permanent, irreversible damage to everything you hold dear. Sister Grace, Chinedu said very carefully, trying his best to maintain diplomatic relations with their neighbor while expressing his growing concerns about the reliability of this alarming information. Did your cousin's friend actually witness these conversations personally and directly with her own eyes and ears? Or is this crucial information coming to us through additional intermediaries who might have their own interpretations, additions, or unconscious modifications? Brother Chinedu, does it really matter how divine warnings and supernatural alerts reach our eager ears? Sister Grace replied with slight impatience and obvious annoyance at having her reliability questioned. What truly matters is that Sister Ngozi receives this absolutely crucial information while there's still sufficient time to protect her beloved family from complete spiritual destruction and financial ruin. And speaking of protection, that's another very important reason I came to visit you this morning. I know someone who possesses the necessary spiritual authority and proven expertise to help your family overcome these dangerous attacks." Ngozi leaned forward with eager anticipation and desperate hope, her eyes bright with the kind of desperate faith that people cling to when they believe their family's very survival depends on finding the right spiritual intervention. "Who can help us, Sister Grace? Please tell me you know someone with real supernatural power to combat these coordinated attacks effectively." Prophet Jeremiah Okafor operates a very powerful and highly respected deliverance ministry in Benin City, and he specializes precisely in this exact type of coordinated, sophisticated spiritual warfare conducted by experienced practitioners of dark arts. Sister Grace announced with obvious satisfaction at being able to provide a concrete solution to their crisis. "My own cousin consulted him just last month when her hard-working husband was experiencing mysterious, unexplainable business failures, and her precious children were suffering from terrifying, recurring nightmares every single night." "What exactly happened when she consulted this prophet?" Chinedu asked, though part of him already dreaded hearing the answer and suspected where this conversation was inevitably heading. Within exactly 2 weeks of Prophet Jeremiah's intensive spiritual intervention and powerful deliverance prayers, absolutely everything in their lives turned around completely and dramatically, Sister Grace reported with obvious excitement and enthusiasm. Her husband found an excellent new job with significantly better pay and improved working conditions. Her son passed his crucial WAEC examinations with outstanding grades that exceeded all expectations, and their previously difficult landlord even agreed to reduce their monthly rent voluntarily without any negotiation. She paused to let this impressive testimony sink in before continuing. The transformation was so remarkable, obvious, and dramatic that everyone in their entire neighborhood started asking what they had done differently and seeking advice about their own spiritual problems. "How much does Prophet Jeremiah charge for his spiritual services and deliverance ministry?" Ngozi asked, though her tone clearly suggested she was prepared to pay whatever amount might be necessary to protect her family from supernatural destruction. The initial comprehensive spiritual diagnosis and evaluation costs 50,000 naira. But Sister Ngozi, you absolutely cannot put any monetary price on your family's spiritual survival and eternal protection, Sister Grace replied earnestly. "Think about it logically and practically. How much would it actually cost your family if something truly terrible happened to your precious children? Expensive hospital bills, devastating funeral expenses, the immeasurable emotional trauma of losing the people you love most in the world. Prevention through spiritual intervention is always significantly cheaper and more effective than attempting to cure serious problems after they have already caused permanent damage." After Sister Grace finally departed, promising to contact her cousin immediately about arranging an urgent emergency appointment with the renowned prophet Jeremiah, the Okwu family found themselves engaged in the increasingly familiar and exhausting pattern of debating expensive spiritual expenditures versus practical financial concerns and basic household responsibilities. "Ngozi, my dear beloved wife, please consider this decision very carefully and thoroughly before we commit our family to such a significant financial obligation," Chinedu said, his voice heavy, with both deep concern for his wife's emotional state and genuine love for her well-being. 50,000 naira represents nearly 2 complete months of my government salary that we work so hard to earn. We could use that substantial amount of money for our children's education, necessary home repairs and improvements, or building our emergency fund for genuine, unexpected situations that require immediate financial response. This is a genuine emergency of the highest priority and most serious nature, Ngozi replied, with frightening determination and absolutely unwavering conviction. Chinedu, what could possibly be more urgent and immediately important than protecting our beloved family from coordinated supernatural attack by experienced practitioners of dark spiritual arts? You heard exactly what Sister Grace reported from multiple reliable sources. People with access to powerful spiritual forces are actively working against us using sophisticated supernatural methods specifically designed to destroy our progress and scatter our divine blessings. But what if these sources are unreliable, or the information has been misunderstood somewhere in the communication process? Chinedu persisted with growing desperation. What if this alarming story has been gradually exaggerated or completely misinterpreted as it passed from person to person through our community? What if we're about to spend our precious family savings attempting to solve serious problems that exist primarily in our imagination rather than in actual spiritual reality? The recovery process after discovering Prophet Jeremiah's deception was long, painful, and required tremendous courage from every family member. Ngozi had to acknowledge that she had spent nearly 100,000 naira based on the elaborate lies of a sophisticated fraudster. She had severely damaged her loving relationship with Adana through false accusations of witchcraft. Most painfully, she had put her innocent family through months of unnecessary stress, fear, and financial hardship based on manufactured spiritual crises. The financial recovery took nearly 2 full years of careful budgeting and sacrifice. The children had to transfer to a less expensive school, and the family lived simply while slowly rebuilding their savings. But through it all, they grew stronger and wiser. 2 years later, Ngozi began sharing her story at community workshops about spiritual discernment. Sisters, I learned expensive lessons about distinguishing genuine spiritual guidance from clever manipulation. Real spiritual wisdom brings peace, not anxiety. It encourages family unity, not suspicion. As the years passed, the Okwu family emerged stronger and more unified than ever. They had learned to distinguish between genuine faith and manufactured fear. Ngozi returned to simple spiritual practices emphasizing gratitude and trust in God's protection. I used to think protecting our family required expensive spiritual warfare, she reflected. Now I understand our greatest protection comes from love, wisdom, and trust in God's goodness. The real curse had never been external spiritual enemies. The real curse was allowing fear and superstition to attack their family from within. Their story became a testament to the power of truth, forgiveness, and the courage to admit mistakes and change course when wisdom is revealed.